You were a one-man Twitter campaign last night to get Monaghan player sent off.
No, I wasn't.
Zapruder film versus after Zapruder film after Zapruder film.
No, I wasn't. I just spotted 2 instances where I was surprised that they weren't dealt with on the pitch.
Now you know what it's like to come up against Dublin in Croke Park. That feeling of like, oh, that should have been given.
We sat here after the game against Longford last year, and we had a 20-minute debate about whether or not if you make contact with the face, you should be sent off. And at the time, I thought that it's an occupational hazard of a contact game, and both of you said, no, any contact with the face, zero tolerance, get rid of it. And I didn't see anyone that exercised about Macaulay getting a pop in the face yesterday.
Who punched him in the face?
You haven't seen the clip?
I was at the Kerry game.
It's on Twitter.
So is it clear enough?
But who's the Monaghan player who punched him?
I thought it was relatively clear. At the same time, it was quite like the Tony Kelly foul from the night before, which people would felt strongly wasn't a red card. I would have more issue with the McCarran one on John Small on the ground, where he comes through him, he hits him in the back of the head with the knee. If it's not deliberate, it's reckless. The Macaulay one is fine it's not fine in isolation, but at the same time, I think the knee is worse. I think there's extenuating circumstances. You could probably say the ball's there, it's just a coming together between the hand and the face. The one McCarran on the ground on Small, I thought probably should have been dealt with. I don't think the referee seen it. I think if the referee sees it, he'll show a red. There was a yellow card shown moments later, but I think that was for a tussle. Fenton had a clear view of what happened. He grabbed him. There was a bit of a pushing and shoving, and then there was a yellow shown for that.
Okay. Are we to expect teams to try and rough Dublin up? Is that what the Monaghan template is here?
I think it's fair enough. I don't think you can read a whole lot into it. Monaghan were brilliant. They obviously have prepared really, really well for the game. I think Dublin had 2 collective sessions as a group. The group that would have played yesterday, I think most of those players were on holidays 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't think they're at a level where they should have been in a position to be 6 points up. I was surprised Dublin started as well as they did, but Monaghan were great. You can't really have too many complaints about losing to the better side and the way that they went about winning the game, particularly the long passing, the kick passing, really accurate. They took their chances really well.
It's just the refereeing you had a problem with.
I thought there was just one particular instance where I thought if he had seen it, it would have been a red. I think he missed it, so you can't complain if he misses it. If he sees it and doesn't give a red, that's the issue. I think he missed it.
Kick to the head, kick to the back of John Small's head. Yeah, fair enough. And the Macaulay one,
it's Dermot Malone.
You think somebody's looking at him and does him with is it kind of, it's a push, a closed fist push?
Yeah, with both hands, and it's Macaulay he's running at full tilt towards Malone, who's just standing his ground, in fairness. So I would have less of an issue with that. At the same time, last year there was a witch hunt for Johnny Cooper when he made contact, I think, with I can't remember the Longford players at the time, with the face, and I don't think that the narrative is the same when it's a Dublin player on the receiving end than if it's a Dublin player on the offending end.
So Johnny Cooper should have been sent off, you're now saying?
No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, it is, though. If you
No.
That they should both be treated equally.
I think
it should be a red card in both instances.
No, I didn't think the first one was a red card.
Okay, so
I think it was a yellow card, and there was no card given.
Johnny Cooper got a yellow card.
Yeah,
challenge
last year.
Yeah, and there was no retrospective. So the witch hunt didn't result in anything.
No, but it was coordinated and it was orchestrated, and it was.
Was it?
Yeah, it was done so to point out the fact that Dublin get away with murder, and it was a way of trying to influence, I think, referees going forward. And there was a couple of leading pundits that tried to draw attention to something that was innocuous enough, I think.
Digger, good morning to you, Digger, says, if Darren wants to moan about the referee, can he explain how Scully didn't get a red for his kick in the last minute? No, I didn't see it.
I don't want to complain, but they're 2 different referees, first of all. So I'd be complaining about a different person.
What do you mean?
There was a change of referee at half time.
Okay, so
Aldrich was hurt.
Well, I mean, all right.
So it's not to.
So Scully didn't have a kick, or did have a kick, but didn't get a red card.
I didn't spot it. I didn't see it. I genuinely didn't.
Okay.
No, I don't think the Macaulay one was a red. I do think the second one, had the referee seen it, he'll give a red, because I think in an instance where a guy is on the ground and you make contact with his head, with your knee, it's reckless, it's probably dangerous, and I think that's a red card.
All right. I'm not going to lie, though, I'm just catching up with it. It does look bad. It's It does look very bad, actually.
Both of them should have been.
No, I don't think the Macaulay. I'm kind of with Darren on the Macaulay one. I think you can definitely give Dermot Malone the benefit of the doubt. The other one does look bad.
It's the lack of consistency, though, because Kelly gets sent off for something that looks quite like that. I know it's hurling and football, it's different, but there's no consistency.
Yeah, I do disagree with your point, though, about... Well, no, I don't think you made the point. And I know this is kind of classic whataboutery, kind of like Digger's saying there, but there is that feeling that you're feeling right now about inconsistency and injustice about little things with refereeing. We felt this for a long time as a supporter that goes up against Dublin GA, and I know that's whataboutery, but just take that feeling, bottle it, and now you know what it's like to not be from Dublin.
Like, if it had an essential bearing on the game, if it changed the course of the game, I'd probably be more angry about it. But at the same time, I think you could have no complaints from a Dublin point of view. I think they were beaten by the better team. I think Monaghan were just better in the second half in particular.
Nathan Murphy tweets, are we going to have the PR... Nathan Murphy tweets, are we going to have the PR arm of Dublin GAA on every Monday morning? Yes, we have Darren on every single morning. We have him on every single morning.
So I want to know who the pundits are that orchestrated the campaign.
The Mayo PR representative of Ireland. The most famous son of Mayo. The second most famous son of Mayo.
Yeah. Look, you guys all have your jobs to do and you're all just doing them.
It was Spillane, wasn't it?
Was it Spillane?
Yeah, and on this programme as well, I would say there was a relatively orchestrated...
There was nothing orchestrated. It should have been a red card. I think it should have been a red card. Come on, it should have.
You don't think the Macaulay one was a red card?
I didn't say that. I actually think the Macaulay one is. I think that we're going to enter a phase where anybody who makes contact with a head injury, with the head area in any kind of forceful way, any of those tackles are all going to start being red cards sooner rather than later. And the sooner we move to that, the better. And any contact with the face area, because you have a duty of care, should be a red card. Like the fact that you can't even look and see a replay and go, why was Keith Higgins so pissed off? What incensed Keith Higgins, who is one of the most experienced footballers in the country still playing football at the moment? I've never seen him react like that before. Why does he turn around and respond to that? Let's just go over and have a look and go, ooh, well, straight red, and we'll deal with you afterwards. And then we'll come up with a 3-month or 6-month ban for that type of behaviour. Instead, it looks like it's going to be anything from 1 game to maybe 3 games, and we'll see what happens. Like nonsensical stuff, really, when you think about it.
I think there's a danger of watering the game down too much. I think I agree with your point in principle. If it's a violent act or a strike towards the head, absolutely it should be dealt with the most severe manner possible. In terms
or a gouge.
Or a gouge, yeah, absolutely. Deal with that. Zero tolerance. But in a contact sport, I think there is a little bit of room for error, and I don't think you're going to be able to eliminate all contact, accidental or otherwise, with the head.
I can't wait for the retribution from the Dublin players for this, and we will get you on to discuss the incidences. Like, you should just realise what county you're from and how they are the experts of this, and this is part of the aura that they have.
They absolutely play on the edge. We've established that.
More than any other county in Ireland.
And get away with it too.
And get away with it. Yeah. They are experts. Evil geniuses.
Welcome to the ball game. We've got Conor McKeown on the line to talk to us about some of the weekend's action as well. Conor, good morning to you. How you doing?
Morning, lads.
So, in a weird kind of way, is Jim Gavin not that displeased about the fact that his team came back after 2 collective sessions, as Darren says, started really well, showed some signs of what it is we know they are, and then, got a proper battle against Monaghan yesterday?
Yeah, I think they were always going to get a proper battle. I know a lot of people kind of in and around Dublin that were pretty, they would have backed Monaghan, because like, if you take it that Dublin were missing as many players as they were, and they had such little competitive or collective training done by the time they hit the game, they were always going to be gassed. I think what changed the dynamic in a big way was when they went so far up early on in the game, and then you're looking at it saying, well, look, if Dublin are 6 or 7 points up here, they don't concede those sort of leads anymore. That's just not a trait of this team. But you can see as the game wore on that Monaghan gradually got into it. It was pretty ferocious for a game at the end of January in terms of the physical interaction. But I think that's how players kind of compensate for their lack of match fitness at this time of year. But it was interesting that Monaghan used the offensive mark so well, because just reading Jim's quotes there this morning and sort of reading between the lines, I think what he's saying is that given that only some of these rules made it in for the league, and they won't be here for the championship whatsoever, they're actually a bit of an irritant. And I think you can probably draw a line between the managers that need to do really well in the league and the managers that are using the league to simply set their team up for the championship. And I think that's the same demarcation that you can invoke to show which team are actually practicing very seriously with these rules and which team aren't.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense if you're the Dubs and every single fibre of your being is trying to win 5 in a row to spend 3 or 4 months perfecting the art of the offensive mark when it's going to be useless for you in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, like, we were here with Owen and Anthony Miles on Thursday, and Anthony was talking about the offensive mark and how he thought it might change the game in a very positive way, and I was hugely sceptical because, like you know, for the simple reason that if an offensive mark is such a rewarding skill to execute in a game, opposition teams inevitably are going to set up in such a way that makes it harder for you to execute that. But Dublin didn't really make any great allowances to how Monaghan started to kick the ball in the second half, particularly when the two lads came on. So like, it'd be interesting to see whether it's the law of diminishing returns as the league goes on, because like, it's such a potent weapon. You know, a free kick from inside the 45, like that's kind of gold dust to a lot of teams in tight Division 1 games. So, you know, I'd be interested to see whether it actually makes for a more defensive game for a lot of teams that would be hell-bent on not conceding that defensive mark. But I think, you know, games involving Dublin this year mightn't be the best kind of test cases for deciding how some of these rules are being carried out.
Is that because Dublin tend to allow the man inside to sometimes just obtain possession as long as that defender is capable of actually smothering that person and making sure that person goes nowhere? Because it seems that that's a very effective manner of Dublin and their swarm defence.
Yeah, they do an awful lot of putting pressure on the ball out the pitch before it gets kicked in. And, you know, traditionally they've gone with very pacey defenders who can kind of get out in front of their man. You know, they almost invite the kick in and then kind of back themselves to beat the man out in front of the ball. But, you know, I think, again, at this time of year, and unfortunately this will colour an awful lot of the conversations we have about GAA over the next couple of weeks, at this time of year, it's very hard to put that kind of pressure on the ball out the pitch because, you know, you need an awful lot of fitness in your legs. And, you know, it was obvious that, you know, I think it was a fair performance from Dublin yesterday given the circumstances. But, you know, they were definitely gassed. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, like, in a way, Dublin need to expect that the target on their back this year is going to be more pronounced than it has been in previous years. And again, I suspect that actually, if you're the Dublin management team, the hard physical battle that they got is what they're going to expect from every game in the league. And again, not the worst thing to be able to get into that team and to that dressing room this week and go, look, that's exactly what you're going to face week in, week out. Now we're here and we're back to business. Not that the team needs any motivation, because we know they don't, but you know, they're going to be reading about the hunger issue in the papers and
yeah, well, I suppose the thing about it from a Dublin point of view is that, you know, when you play every week in Division 1, that every team you play is using you as a barometer, you know, like that, you know, that every team, when they set up against you, are saying to themselves, well, if we can beat Dublin this weekend, every manager is saying we can use that to say, look, like, that's like O'Rourke's second time in a row beating Dublin, albeit in a league game that was the last league game of the season last year, and this year in the first league game of the season. So, you know, like, that's still a huge thing for Malachy O'Rourke to be able to turn around to his players and say, look, we've beaten them twice, let's go and beat them in Croke Park in a championship game. And every manager is saying that now as well. And there are an awful lot of teams that are in that bracket of you know, the second tier. Like, the first tier is really Dublin, and after that, you know, is there much difference at the moment between Kerry and Monaghan and Galway and Mayo? There's probably not a whole lot. So they know that the same thing is going to happen next week when Galway come to Croke Park. You know, Galway beating Dublin and Croke Park, even at this early stage in the league, would be a step up for them. And then it's an interesting dynamic because Dublin go to Tralee for their third game of the league. So, you know, whatever levels of fitness they had yesterday in that game, they're not going to be hugely improved in 2 weeks' time because the matches come pretty thick and fast. So, you know, and they have players playing Sigerson Cup this week as well. So, you know, this is probably what we'll see for Dublin for the next 2 weeks until they have that I think, 1 week break in the middle of the league.
Yeah, I overheard someone in Killarney saying yesterday that Kerry will have the opportunity to relegate Dublin on the 9th of February.
Yeah, well, actually, that game would be very interesting to watch because 2 years ago, the Dublin game down in Tralee, it was a Saturday night game, and it was just, I think it was the day after St. Patrick's Day, and it was just getting dark when they threw the ball in for it, and it was one of those unique kind of sparky atmospheres, and I think it will be again this year. But Dublin kind of do expect that everywhere they go. They tend to be able to put it out of their head and get a performance. You know, you just look at how well they played belatedly last year when they went up to Omagh and beat Tyrone in the Super 8 thing. So, like, none of this is particularly new, and it was interesting that Jim Gavin handed out no debuts yesterday, that despite the number of players that he was missing, he still went with people who've been around the squad for a long, long time. You know, it's like, Jim is obviously building his team for the championship, but it's not about experimentation in terms of individual players, or it certainly isn't for the moment.
You talk about kind of cauldrons of atmospheres when it comes to National League, and McHale Park is definitely one of them, and it seemed that way. I wasn't there myself, but it seemed that way on Saturday night. What did you make of James Horan's first return to a competitive game as Mayo manager?
I think it was probably went along expected lines. You know, you're not going to get a team going out and blowing another team away at this time of year in Division 1 when they're both kind of physically at the same space. You know, it's hard to read. It really is hard to read. It was a pretty, you know, I wouldn't say it was a dour game, but it wasn't a brilliant game. I think Brian Reap scoring a goal for Mayo, you know, obviously a vital goal at that was a huge thing for them, because, you know, they are looking for young players to come through into the team. And as much as you want to give players like himself and Diskin lots of game time, they are inside forwards. If they don't get on the scoreboard and they're being kept in the team until Andy Moran and Cillian O'Connor come back, it'll feel to them that all they're doing is being picked in the team until Andy Moran and Cillian O'Connor come back. So yeah, there were some bright points, but look, you know, that's a pretty experienced Mayo team, and you kind of would have expected them to win it regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah, great stats at the end of the game. 1986 was the last time that Roscommon have won there in the championship, and 1988 was the last time they've won there in the league. So you know, it's been a while since they won a game in Castlebar, and certainly wasn't going to happen at the weekend in that weather. I don't know what you made of the Kerry-Tyrone performance. Owen said that the first time Kerry play on national TV, there might be a bit of outcry about the style of play when everybody gets the opportunity to see the fact that they were out-Tyroning Tyrone at the weekend.
They were a bit, but I don't think that's a particularly new development.
No.
You know, managers kind of cut their cloth depending on games, and like Kerry did it plenty of times over the last couple of years when it suited them too. Like, and they go back to the 2014 All-Ireland final, they out-Donegal. So, you know, again, I think Peter Keane is one of these managers that actually has to strike a very particular balance, that he knows he can't go on a run of games and lose them because there will be people howling at the moon down in Kerry. That's just the way it goes. And by the same token, he has to bring young players into the squad, because that's really what he's left with. I was really interested that Darren Moynihan and Donnacha O'Connor started but weren't named to the team, and that strikes me as a manager who is conscious of trying to sort of ease any bit of pressure or talk or any kind of burden on young players that he's putting into the team. Because, you know, if you name that on a Friday night and people spend the weekend analysing these two lads, who they are and what they're going to contribute, it might put a small bit of pressure on them. So I don't know whether that was a preordained move or whether it was a calculated move, but it was an interesting one, because like, they're two good players, and I thought they played pretty well yesterday.
I think it was calculated. I think James Dunne, who was carrying a knock into the weekend as well, so I'd say that move was definitely calculated. Diarmuid O'Connor as well, singled out for praise by Mike Work yesterday. The other game we wanted to just briefly touch on, obviously, was Galway against Cavan. And I'm not sure, was it you making the point? Somebody was making the point anyway on the show over the last week, Conor, that there is this sort of yo-yo system that might develop in football over the next couple of years, where you've got the top 7 teams and then one of them gets relegated every year, and kind of a rotating cast of the Cavans and the Roscommons and whoever else may come up and down. It seems that that pattern might start to emerge already, with Roscommon and Cavan, as I mentioned, having lost at the weekend.
Yeah, that's a defeat for Cavan and Roscommon. And like, if you go back to, was it 2 years ago, when Kevin McStay got Roscommon into Division 1 for the first time, they made a very, very conscientious effort to start it. I think they won 3 of their first 4 games and preserved Division 1 status very, very early. And it looked like a great move, and then they flatlined in the championship. So, like, you know, I think a manager, if they're organised, and it mightn't be true of Roscommon in this situation because they only appointed a manager when Anthony Cunningham was appointed back in November. But I think if you're organised enough, you could make hay in the league, but it might be at the expense of further down the tracks. And the same thing with Cavan yesterday. I think they had 3 black cards against Galway, which, you know, it's not going to end well for you if you kind of fall into that trap, because, you know, there's the terms of engagement are different in Division 1, and you have to be, you know, as much as you want to front up the teams, you have to be smart about how you play your game as well. And just on the limited highlights that I saw, they probably look to be a small bit naive.
Conor, great stuff. Thanks for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Conor McKeown.